Scary telling.
I never thought that I would be one to fall victim to a horrifying experience, but that was before I met the grinning stranger. It all began one day while I was walking home from work. It was already dark outside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every time I turned around, there was no one there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Just as I was about to reach my apartment building, I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me, sir?" I turned around to see a man, around my age, standing there. He had a strange smile on his face, and something about him made me uneasy. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Actually, I wanted to thank you," the man said. "I saw that you had given someone gold on Reddit, and I thought it was really kind of you." I was taken aback. I had never met this person before, but he seemed to know about my Reddit activity. No problem," I said, trying to brush it off. "I really have to go now." But the man didn't move. Instead, he just kept grinning at me. "Thanks for the gold, kind stranger," he said. And with that, he turned and walked away. I thought that was the end of it, but it was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I saw the man everywhere. He was always there, watching me from a distance, grinning that same unnerving grin. It was like he was waiting for something. One night, I was woken up by a strange noise outside my apartment. I peeked out the window to see the grinning stranger standing on the sidewalk, staring up at me. I froze, not sure what to do. Then, the man spoke. "Hey there," he said. "I was wondering if you could do me a favor." I didn't want to engage with him, but something about the way he said it made me curious. "What kind of favor?" I asked. "Well, I have this dental implant," the man said, still grinning that creepy smile. "And it's been bothering me lately. I was wondering if you could take it out for me." I was taken aback. Why on earth would he ask me to do that? "I'm not a dentist," I said. "I can't just take out your dental implant." The man's smile didn't falter. "Oh, I'm sure you could figure it out," he said. "And I'll make it worth your while. How about I give you a reward? Anything you want." I was hesitant, but something about the offer was too tempting to resist. I agreed to meet the man at a nearby park the next day, under the pretense of helping him with his implant. As soon as I arrived, I realized my mistake. The park was empty, and the man was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, I heard a rustling behind me, and I turned around to see the grinning stranger emerge from the bushes. "I'm so glad you could make it," he said, still grinning. "Let's get started." Before I could react, the man had grabbed me by the shoulders and forced me down onto a nearby bench. He held my head steady as he began to twist at his jaw, and I heard a sickening crack as the implant was pulled free. I tried to scream, but the man had his hand over my mouth, muffling my cries. "Thanks for the gold, kind stranger," the man said, holding up the implant in front of my face. His smile was wider than ever, and his eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight. I was paralyzed with fear as he leaned in closer. "I have one more favor to ask," the man whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "I need your soul." I struggled to break free, but his grip was too strong. Suddenly, the air around us grew cold, and a dark mist began to swirl around us. I felt a sharp pain in my chest as if something was being ripped from me. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was alone in the park. My chest still ached, and my mouth was dry. I stumbled home, still in shock from what had happened. Over the next few days, I felt like something was off. My skin was paler than usual, and my eyes seemed to glow in the dark. I couldn't sleep, haunted by nightmares of the grinning stranger. Then, one night, I saw him again. He was standing outside my window, watching me with that same eerie smile. And that's when I realized I had given the grinning stranger more than just a dental implant. I had given him my soul. From that moment on, I was never the same. The grinning stranger was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me. And every time I saw him, I felt my soul slipping further away. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, and I knew that I would never be free. I always loved spending summers at our family cabin in the woods. It was a rustic but cozy place, full of memories and family traditions. But there was always something eerie about the large antique mirror that hung over the staircase. It had been there as long as anyone could remember, and there were rumors that it had once belonged to a powerful witch. My grandfather, who had been the patriarch of our family, had always been fascinated by the mirror. He would spend hours staring into it, lost in thought. But on the day that he died, something strange happened. As my mom and her siblings were gathered around his hospital bed, saying their final goodbyes, the mirror suddenly cracked down the middle, as if it couldn't bear to witness the passing of its longtime admirer. After that day, strange things began to happen whenever my family spoke about my grandfather. We would hear the sound of breaking glass, or find shards of broken bottles on the floor. It was as if the mirror was trying to communicate with us, or perhaps warn us of something. Years went by, and the cabin became a place of both happy memories and foreboding. Whenever we gathered to tell stories or reminisce about my grandfather, we would brace ourselves for the inevitable sound of shattering glass. One summer, while I was in my late teens, my family and I decided to spend a long weekend at the cabin. As usual, we found ourselves talking about my grandfather and his fascination with the mirror. But this time, something different happened. As we were gathered around the living room, we heard a strange humming sound coming from upstairs. Curious, I decided to investigate. As I climbed the stairs, the humming grew louder and more intense. It seemed to be emanating from the mirror itself. When I reached the top of the staircase, I saw that the mirror was glowing with an otherworldly light, and the cracks in its surface were pulsing with a strange energy. Suddenly, I felt something wrap around my ankle, and I fell forward, tumbling down the stairs. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on the floor, with the mirror standing over me, still glowing and humming. I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if I was paralyzed. Then, I heard a voice. It was my grandfather's voice, but it sounded different somehow. Distorted and full of malice. "Welcome to my world," the voice said. "You'll never leave." Terrified, I tried to move, but I was trapped. The mirror seemed to be feeding off my energy, draining me of my life force. As I lay there, helpless, I realized that the mirror was cursed and that my grandfather had been its victim all along. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the humming stopped and the mirror went dark. I regained control of my body, and I stumbled to my feet, feeling weak and dizzy. But the worst was yet to come. As I looked into the mirror, I saw my own reflection staring back at me. But it wasn't me. It was my grandfather, with the same twisted smile and glowing eyes that I had seen in the mirror just moments before. And as he reached out to touch me, I realized that I was trapped in the mirror's curse, just like he had been all those years ago. Growing up, my sister and I always loved playing with our Barbie dolls. We had every type of Barbie and Ken doll you could imagine. But one day, something strange happened that we could never explain. My parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving my sister and me home alone. We were having a blast playing with our Barbies, setting up scenes and acting out different scenarios. We had just finished one scene where Barbie was in trouble and Ken had to come to the rescue. We set up Ken on the couch and threw Barbie in his direction, hoping he would catch her. But as soon as Barbie was in the air, something bizarre happened. Ken lifted his arms and caught Barbie with ease. My sister and I stared in shock. We had never seen anything like it. We looked at each other, wondering if the other had somehow made it happen, but we knew deep down that it wasn't possible. After that incident, strange things started happening around the house. Doors would open and close by themselves, and we could hear footsteps when no one was there. My sister and I started to feel like we were being watched, like something was lurking in the shadows. One night, we were in bed when we heard a strange noise coming from the living room. We tiptoed out of our bedroom and peered around the corner, trying to see what was happening. That's when we saw it. The Ken doll was moving on its own, its arms and legs flailing about as if possessed by some otherworldly force. We screamed and ran back to our bedroom, locking the door behind us. We huddled together under the covers, too scared to move or make a sound. But the noise from the living room grew louder and more frantic, as if the possessed Ken doll was trying to break down the door. The next morning, we found the Ken doll in the living room, its arms and legs twisted in unnatural positions. We were too afraid to touch it, so we left it there, hoping that someone would come home soon and take care of it. From that day on, my sister and I were terrified of our dolls. We tried to avoid them as much as possible, but they seemed to have a life of their own. We could hear them moving and whispering in the dead of night, and we were convinced that they were trying to communicate with us. Eventually, we couldn't take it anymore. We begged our parents to get rid of the dolls, but they didn't believe us. They thought we were just being silly and told us to stop making things up. But we knew the truth. The Ken doll was possessed, and it was trying to harm us. We never played with dolls again, and we never forgot the terror that we felt that night. To this day, I still get chills thinking about that possessed Ken doll and the evil that it brought into our home. I never believed in ghosts or spirits until my sister's teddy bear came into my life. It all started when my sister was diagnosed with a rare disease and had to spend several months in the hospital. She was only 12 at the time, and the long hospital stay was taking a toll on her. One day, her classmates surprised her with a teddy bear, which they hoped would bring her some comfort during her stay. It was a cute, fluffy bear with a pink bow around its neck, and my sister fell in love with it immediately. She named it Rosie and took it everywhere with her, even to her treatments and checkups. Months went by, and my sister finally got better. She was discharged from the hospital, and Rosie came home with us. At first, everything was fine. Rosie sat on my sister's bed and watched over her as she recovered. But then, strange things started happening. It began with small things, like Rosie being in a different position than where my sister left her. But soon, it became more sinister. My sister started hearing strange noises coming from Rosie's direction. She would wake up in the middle of the night to find the bear sitting up, staring at her with its lifeless eyes. My sister would try to rationalize it, telling herself that it was just her imagination or that the bear had fallen over and moved by itself. But as the incidents continued, it became harder and harder to ignore. One night, my sister was awakened by a strange sound coming from Rosie. It sounded like a low growl, and it was coming from inside the bear. My sister tried to dismiss it as a malfunction, but then the bear's head turned towards her, and it spoke in a voice that was not of this world. "Hello, little girl," the bear said. "I'm Rosie. Would you like to be my friend?" My sister screamed and ran to her parents' room. They didn't believe her story and assumed she was just having a nightmare. But the incidents continued, and my sister became more and more terrified of the bear. She refused to be alone in the same room as it and would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. One day, my sister's friend came over, and my sister reluctantly showed her the bear. The friend picked it up and hugged it, but then something strange happened. The bear's eyes started glowing, and it began to move on its own. It spoke in the same eerie voice, asking the friend if she wanted to be its friend too. The friend dropped the bear and ran out of the room, never to return. It was then that we knew something was seriously wrong with the bear. We tried to get rid of it, but every time we did, it would somehow find its way back into the house. It was as if the bear was cursed or haunted by something malevolent. One night, my sister and I were sitting in the living room, watching TV, when Rosie suddenly appeared on the couch next to us. We hadn't seen it in weeks, and it was a shock to see it again. But then, it spoke in that same creepy voice, asking if we wanted to be its friend. We ran out of the house, screaming, and never returned. We sold the house soon after and moved far away from the cursed teddy bear. Years have passed, and I still can't shake the feeling that the bear is out there, waiting for its next victim. I warn anyone who sees a bear that looks like Rosie to stay away, for it is not just a harmless stuffed animal but a vessel for something sinister and evil. I remember the day my grandmother died like it was yesterday. I was sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, watching as her breathing became more and more labored. It was a relief when she finally passed away, as she had been suffering for so long. But looking back now, I can't help but wonder what was really going on during those last few weeks of her life. My grandmother had always been a bit eccentric, but nothing too out of the ordinary. It wasn't until she became seriously ill that things started to get weird. She would often stare off into space, as if she was seeing something that the rest of us couldn't. And then she started talking to dead relatives. At first, my family brushed it off as the ramblings of a sick woman. But the more she talked, the more we started to believe that maybe she really was seeing something. She would say things like, "I'll see you soon, Alice," or "I'm coming soon, Mabel," as if she was talking directly to her deceased family members. We tried to rationalize it, saying that maybe she was just hallucinating due to her illness. But then strange things started happening around the house. My grandfather, who had passed away years before, was known for his love of crossword puzzles. One day, we found a completed crossword puzzle on my grandmother's bedside table. It wasn't until later that we realized that the puzzle had been completed with answers that had never been written in the newspaper. And then there were the visitors. Every night, my grandmother would talk about the people who came to visit her. They were always friendly, she said, and she seemed to enjoy their company. But when we asked her who they were, she couldn't give us a straight answer. She would just smile and say, "Oh, they're just some old friends." It wasn't until after her death that things really started to get strange. My family and I were going through our things, trying to sort out what to keep and what to get rid of. As we were going through her dresser drawers, we found a small notebook tucked away in the back. Inside were pages and pages of detailed descriptions of the visitors my grandmother had been seeing. There were names, dates, and even sketches of their faces. But the most disturbing thing was the last entry in the notebook. It was dated the day before my grandmother died, and it simply read, "They're getting closer." That was when we realized that maybe my grandmother hadn't been talking to friendly old friends after all. Maybe she had been seeing something much more sinister. And maybe, just maybe, they were coming for her. In the weeks after her death, strange things continued to happen around the house. We would hear footsteps in the hallway at night, even though everyone was in bed. Doors would open and close on their own, and we would find objects move from where we had left them. I never saw the visitors myself, but I can't help but wonder if they're still out there somewhere. Maybe they're waiting for me, or maybe they're waiting for someone else. All I know is that I'll never forget the feeling of unease that settled over our family during those last few weeks of my grandmother's life. And I'll never forget the sense of dread that still lingers in that house to this day.